Okay, so let's move on to Leo, rising, sun, or moon. And let's see if we've got anything in the critical houses for Leo.
Well, we've got Saturn's going to retrograde back into the 6th. And the 6th house is a critical house for Saturn, right? Because Saturn's connected with our health and it's connected with our discipline, right? So when Saturn's going through the 6th house, we can modify our health routines in a positive and long-term way. So if you were wanting to make any changes, quitting a habit, starting to bring in supplements, starting to exercise, whatever it is that you want to do to help your health and do it consistently and more long-term, that's going to be more possible, more supported while Saturn's transiting through the 6th house. And while Saturn's retrograding through the 6th house, will bring it up even more.
And then joining Jupiter there too. Jupiter's been there for quite a while now and will continue to be there. So that's an interesting combination, Saturn and Jupiter together in the 6th. I think Jupiter is...
Well, Jupiter is the 8th in the 6th. Yeah. And so Jupiter can be bringing some more hyper awareness towards your mortality. And Jupiter going through the 6th house, I've always noticed, is another beneficial. It's not a critical Baba, but when it's going through the 6th house, it can help lend itself towards you making health conscious choices. And so I believe that Jupiter there is going to be helping Saturn, supporting Saturn, because Jupiter delights anything that it's with. So Jupiter is going to be helping that Saturn even more so towards making good health choices.
Yeah, and Jupiter's a manifester, so that helps. Now, there is something I do want to say about Mars in the 9th. It's not a critical house for Mars, but the 9th is the house of marriage. And Mars is a separating planet. It can be a planet for divorce. And so if you're finding yourself, I don't know, maybe more annoyed, if you're in a partnership and you're more annoyed with your partner than usual, just keep in mind, it's just Mars going through there. And it could mean that it's a good time to talk about certain problems, perhaps, and then how to solve those problems. So that would be like a more productive and positive way of dealing with Mars in the 9th.
Yeah, I'm imagining that.
You say too that's often when you want to travel, right? When Mars is
right in the 9th. That's what I was going to say. It could bring up stuff around travel, and it can also bring up stuff around education. So it could bring up those challenges in the marriage, but it could bring those challenges up with a teacher or a guru as well, just needing to solve some sort of conflict or directing your energy towards solving a problem in that area.
Right. Now, Mercury in the 12th, again, not a critical house, but
important.
Remember Ernst gave an example that this is when he wrote a book or when he finished up writing a book, because the 12th house is stuff that you do on your own. When you're able to endure long periods of solitude. So it can be, the 12th house is also a house of meditation and spiritual practices. So you could get more into that. But if you have a research project or if you're writing something, that is also a really good time to take it much further, maybe even finish it up. So.
I love Mercury in my 12th house. For some reason, it always brings so much information my way. And I notice it. I notice it a lot. So Mercury retrograding in the 12th house, stay open to that information coming in or whatever it is, because you can get some very deep. Mercury is prominent in the D24. And so the D24, one of the houses in that Varga, it's about knowing and understanding, deep understanding. So the 12th house can really, that transit of Mercury in the 12th can really just bring some, if you're trying to learn astrology or trying to learn something, you can have one of those really deep aha moments, really get it on some level. So
That's right. And it's a Mercury in a moon sign. So write it all down. Because Mercury moon combinations, that's a writing combination. It's also a healing combination, which is interesting because it's opposite Jupiter. And when Saturn goes back there too, it'll be opposite Saturn in the sixth. So write everything down, your inspirations. You'll be glad that you did later. Okay, so anything else you want to say about Leo?
Nope.
Okay, now Virgo rising, sun or moon. For Virgo rising, we have Jupiter going through the critical fifth house. Jupiter is the natural ruler of children. The fifth house is the house of children and creativity. And that is, so Jupiter went retrograde on May 14th, to go direct September 13th and stay there until December 19th. And then also for Virgo rising, we have Venus in an angular house. It's the 10th house. It's not a critical house for Venus in particular, but it's an angle. So you'll have a more noticeable effect because it's in an angle. So what do you want to say about that?
Jupiter going through the fifth house is a really great transit for you and your creativity, but also to connect with your children. So if you don't have children, it's a creative element. It could bring children. It could bring some sort of connection with children. But if you do have children, it's a really great transit for bonding with your children, spending time with them, getting to know them, connecting with them. So, that's what that one's really, really good for. It may bring some responsibilities with children just because Saturn's going to be going back in there. And we've talked about Jupiter and Saturn's sign. It's a lot about responsibility. So this could be about having some extra responsibilities with your children, but there's a lot of potential for joy there because Jupiter can bring our joy in where it is.
Yeah, that's true. Jupiter is joy. Now, we've got Mars going to the 8th. And again, I just want to say, because Mars is going through the 8th, he's going to be there he's going into Mars. Mars is going into Aries, June 29th. We'll go retrograde September 8th, direct on November 14th, and stay there until January 7th of 2021. So that's a long time. And going through the 8th house, it can be a separating factor in your relationship if you're in a relationship. Maybe your partner has to spend more time at the office or has to travel or go somewhere for his work or their work. It could also be too a time when there's other ways that you feel separated from your partner. And I think I found that knowing when planets are going through particular houses that are important for a relationship, it actually helps me. So like when I'm feeling something like anger, for instance, or irritation, or I'm less tolerant than usual, oftentimes knowing that where Mars is, for instance, will stop me from saying something that then I have to do a lot of repair work around, right? So
like this one thing from astrology, it's learn where Mars is so you can nip it. If you know Mars is there, you can just de-escalate.
So sometimes there's a need for certain separation in relationship too. So if you've been wanting to separate from your partner for a long time, but you haven't it didn't feel right, like the right time, or you didn't feel like you had the resources or whatever reason, you may find that now you're feeling it. You're like, okay, now it's time. I can do this.
Yeah.
So
I think it's also important to pay attention to Mars whenever it's transiting through the 8th house, but this transit specifically because it's retrograding, because the 8th house is your body. And even though Mars is going to be in really good dignity, it's going to be a very strong Mars. And it's when Mars transits through the 8th house, That's one of those transits that I pay attention to just slow down a little bit, because Mars can represent hits to the body, right? It's these sharp, it's a cruel planet. And during this transit, we haven't talked about this too much, but this Mars is going to be in a square aspect with Saturn.
True.
And this...
So what that means, let me explain that. So when Saturn goes back into the fifth, Mars is still going to be here. It's going to creating a right angle. And that's what a square aspect is. Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're fine. That's great. And we haven't been talking about the Rashi aspects, right? But there's the Rashi aspects for Virgo from Mars, the third house, the sixth house, the eighth house, and the 12th house. These are some difficult houses where Mars is going to be throwing its energy in. The third house is the house of our willpower, but it's also the eighth from the eighth. And then we've got the sixth, which is our health, and the 12th, which is expenses and letting things go. So it's a really important time for Virgo to slow it down and to use that Mars for extending your longevity. So something like Tai Chi, martial arts, meditation, using your willpower and your energy to extend your longevity and enhance your health would be a really great way to be able to harness that Mars's energy for all the signs, but for Virgo specifically because of the houses that are getting activated in the eighth house.
Right. And then the square to Saturn means you'll work really hard at
Yeah.
it. That's the hard work aspect.
Yeah.
Venus in the 10th, being there for so long, is going to be there until August 8th. I think that would help a lot with this too, but Venus there in an angular house, it could just bring some nice things into your responsibilities, because the 10th is the house of it could be a job, it could be raising children. There's a lot of ways that shows up. Your reputation. It's in a Mercury sign, Gemini, right? Which in horror is a loud voice sign. People may talk about you in a positive way. Your reputation can be enhanced. Mm-hmm. And it's aspecting, since we're talking about Rossi aspects, it's also aspecting the first house of the body and the self too. So that also helps with what Channing was saying about doing things for your health. It's directly aspecting the fourth house, which is your inner emotional life and your literal home, where maybe you can fix some things up and beautify things a bit. And then the seventh house, it's aspecting the seventh house of the partners and your relationship with the public. And if you're in a type of profession where you do have a relationship with the public, that will enhance your reputation. So, you ready to go on to the next sign, or anything else you want to say?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So now we are in Libra, rising sun or moon. And let me see. Now, we do have a planet in a critical house for Libra rising, and that is Venus, the ascendant lord, the lord of Venus rising in the ninth. So you want to talk about that? Start with it?
Well, that's one of the critical houses. The ninth house is one of the critical houses for Venus. And, Venus retrograding is a transit that can help us restructure our values. So what it is we want, what it is we're really motivated to put our energy into, what we feel like is going to be bringing us fulfillment. So Venus's transit through the ninth house can usually be a resolution around a commitment to something that we feel like will be bringing us fulfillment. It's the house of marriage. So that ninth house, it can really bring in a lot of support into the marriage. Or if you're trying to decide if you're in the right relationship or if you're not in the right relationship, by the end of this Venus retrograde transit, you'll be clear about what it is that where your values are and where you want to put your energy into trying acquiring your own fulfillment. So
yes, in fact, I had an experience with this the last time Venus was retrograding through, I believe it was my ninth. We read a book together called We Do by Stan Tatkin. It was probably the best thing that we've ever done for our marriage, honestly. Now, of course, Venus was going through that house, so we could feel it in a lot of ways. It was really a wonderful period of time. But this book, oh my goodness, this book is so great. It's very validating, especially for the female, because we're the ones who tend to notice like little things that that either support the relationship or harm the relationship. And Stan, he's got a great sense of humor. He's a really good writer. It's really clear. It's easy to read, and it's excellent. We've both been recommending it to like everybody ever since. So for Libra rising, get the book. You can get it on Amazon. And this is Channing and I actually did a series of videos on attachment theory as it relates to relationships. And Stan Tatkin is one of those authors. So I can link below the links to those videos that Channing and I did together on how this affects relationships.
Right. If you're not in a relationship, those books are really good too, because they're all about working with techniques to become more aware. And so you're talking about how wonderful that was for your marriage. It's such a great thing to research and read and study different understandings about relationship. Relationship is one of the biggest things that people come to an astrologer to talk about. And I always ask people, well, how many books have you read about relationship? How much time have you spent on studying, things about yourself and about how to be in relationship? And it's a really important subject. So reading books like that, Stan Tatkin, he's wonderful.
Yes. Now, here's something that's rather interesting, though, about Libra rising, too. And that is, while Venus is going through the 9th, Mars is going through the 7th.
Yeah.
And Saturn is going to be going back into the 4th. So this is a rather complicated combination, at least in terms of relationship.
Yep, and that's what I was saying about that Venus. It's a good benefic transit, but there's so many other things that are going on here that Venus is actually going to help the Libra rising person sort of reevaluate what it is that they are going to need for their fulfillment, right? And that's going to be, like you said, in conjunction with Mars going through the 7th. And Mars going through the 7th happens to everybody once every 2 years, right? It's a transit that we all can look forward to, where it may bring up some conflicts in our partnerships, or it can be stimulating. So Mars can not always bring up conflicts; it can bring up passion, right? But this Mars is going to be in this 7th house for 6 months. Squaring Saturn. So there's probably going to be some ups and downs with this one.
Some ups and downs. Now, Mars is the 7th house ruler for Libra rising, so it could bring in some real Marsy people for you to have a relationship with. Yeah, somebody who really needs to understand stuff about Venus.
Well, it could also bring a project for you and your partner together to work on overcoming. So Mars going through the 7th house, I've seen it work that way too, where you're really focused with your partner on tackling some sort of crisis, overcoming something.
Oh yeah, it could be having to do with finances because of everything that's been happening with this COVID virus and people not being able to work and the economy, all that. Well, Mars is Rossi aspecting, sign aspecting the 2nd house of money and resources. So that can be the thing that you're going to be working on together.
It could be real estate too, because the 7th is the secondary house, right? And Jupiter's in the 4th and Saturn's retrograding back into the 4th. So it could be bringing in, an upgrade on the house, working on the house. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And now Mercury's retrograde in the 10th. So it's an angular house. And Mercury goes retrograde on June 18th, direct on July 12th and stays there until August 6th. So, you want to say something about that, Channing?
Well, Mercury in the 10th house is connected with business, right? Mercury is a planet of business and a planet of information and communication. So it isn't a critical bhava for Mercury, but it is an angular, like you said, in the 10th house. So this could be bringing in news in your career or something to do with communication, information, paperwork, a letter. You know, sometimes you hear Mercury will be literally like information.
Mm-hmm.
Restructuring. Sometimes when Mercury goes retrograde, you want to go back and sort of check everything, redo something.
Right. It's the 9th house lord in the 10th. Yeah. So again, something that you do with your partner if you're in a relationship, having to do with business. Anything else you want to say about this? I mean, Jupiter in the 4th, it's another angular house. Jupiter there is a nice place for Jupiter because it's your inner emotional life.
Well, And Saturn's still influencing that Jupiter, so it's very much about work, right? So getting in there and having to do the work and work on your responsibility here is to be uplifting your inner self, to be working hard on your emotional foundation, your emotional well-being.
Which goes perfectly with Venus in the 9th, because that can be also when you go into therapy.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful therapist during this time to help you with that. Saturn in the 4th, when it goes back in there, where you feel isolated, cut off from people. But yet you also have Jupiter there too. So that makes a lot of sense, Channing. Yeah. Okay, ready for Scorpio?
Yeah.
Are we ever ready for Scorpio? Okay, so Scorpio rising, sun or moon. Let me see. I don't think any of the planets are going through critical houses for Scorpio rising. Do you? I mean, angular maybe. There's Saturn in the, no, it's going to go back into the 3rd. Venus in the 8th. Mercury in the 9th. Mars is in the 6th. So that could be important because Mars is like a 6th house. Mars likes the 6th house.
Mars likes the 6th house. Mars is ruling the 1st. So it's an important planet for Scorpios. This could be an opportunity to be of service. That's why I see a lot of Scorpios with Mars connected with the 6th house, that Mars will bring them into service somehow, helping others.
Yes, overcoming, because it's a house of overcoming obstacles, delays, enemies, whether from without or within. So health issues. It could be when you start an exercise program. And since it's going to be squaring, making an angular aspect to Saturn when it goes back into Capricorn, which it's going to do on July 2nd, you might decide to like start doing something really hard, like lifting weights or something. Since it's the ascendant Lord, it could be a time where you get into the best shape of your life.
Yeah, and 6th house is the secondary work house. Your work environment and your routines, but work, and that Mars is also Rashi aspecting the 1st, the 6th, and the 10th, right?
Yeah.
So this, and the 4th, so it's aspecting the angular houses. So this could actually be it make you busier with work, or you're pushing yourself through something, overcoming something. If you're competing for a job, that Mars in the 6th house can be really beneficial for any sort of competition.
That's true.
Yeah.
It'll push you through. Now, Mercury in the 9th, so it's going retrograde on June 18th, direct July 12th, and we'll stay there till August 6th. The 9th is the house of higher knowledge and universities and learning. So this is a perfect place for Mercury if you want to take a course of some kind. If you want to go back to school, which I think a lot of people are probably going to be doing, taking this opportunity for the break in the career because of the coronavirus to switch to something else. I have several clients who have been emailing me about that very thing, wanting to change things, or maybe not a different career entirely, but to change what they're doing somehow. And Mercury can be assisting that, helping that during that time period. No, do you want to say anything about Venus in the 8th?
Well, Venus in the 8th could be beneficial for any sort of coming together with some harmony, in your relationship. The 8th house is our deep psychological work, and Venus is a healing planet, a nurturing planet, a beneficial planet. The 8th house is also the house of sexuality, one of the houses that can link us with
the bond. It's your
intimacy.
Bond with your partner.
Yeah. So Venus being there could just be enhancing that a little bit, throwing its benefic energy into there, bringing up the volume on the romance a little bit is potential.
That's nice. It's aspecting the 2nd house too, so sign aspecting the 2nd house. So you'll speak a little bit more sweetly. And it's aspecting the 5th house, which is also good for romance, and the 11th house for income and just get-togethers with people. So you ready then for the next sign? Or you want anything else you want to say? Okay.
No, that's great.
So Sagittarius rising.